Hi guys, today I'm gonna explain my coffee machine code. So as you guys would have seen in my previous videos, I created a coffee machine using Python, and a lot of you guys seem to not understand bits of the code. So yeah, so basically I'm just gonna go through and explain why I did it, why did I take the approach that I did. Um, in my previous videos. So here you could see what I have is an old coffee machine. So this was originally my first attempt at the project, and what it was just sequential code. So it was code where I didn't employ any classes. I didn't have any methods, any objects. I essentially didn't employ any object-oriented programming. So it was just straight up sequential code using logic. So as you can see here for the old coffee machine, I started off with a dictionary just containing the I believe it's the amount of each ingredient in the coffee, which are these first three these first three figures. uh, I believe this is water, this is the amount of milk, and this is the amount of coffee, and this is the price of the coffee, the particular coffee. So I established this dictionary first for each one of the coffees, and then listed the starting values I would want in the machine. So essentially, the machine would, once you start the coffee machine, it would have 300 milliliters of water, 200 of milk, 100 grams of coffee, and no money. Um, and I created this coffee cost variable also. So yeah, and obviously, uh, the for the customer, and then the values of each one of the coins that will be placed into the machine. So as you know, a coffee machine would take coins. I mean, now it probably takes contactless, or some might even take bills. But just for simplicity purposes, I put it as if the coffee machine would take coins. So this is the value of each one of the coins. So we have a penny, which is 1 cent, a nickel, which is 5 cents, dime, which is 10, and a quarter, which is 25 cents. Um, so yeah, so to start off, I have a variable called coffee machine on, which is uh, assigned as true, and this essentially starts. This is essentially used for this while loop here. So you can see while coffee machine on is true, and this is used essentially to keep the coffee machine running while this variable is true. And I have something called an input check, which is then using this other while loop here. And essentially, this input check is just to ensure that the input is correct. And if it's not correct, this section of the code will continue to run to ensure that the customer is putting in the right, information that the machine requires to process the coffee, and no other, you know, I guess, bad information that the coffee machine wouldn't recognize. So yeah, so here we have an input. So the machine would then ask you, what coffee would you like? Espresso, latte, cappuccino, and it also gives you a balance, so you can see at any point in the operation of the coffee machine. Once you get to this input, you could actually check to see the amount of money you have, and the whole reason for having this balance option is so that if you want to order a second time, so if you order one coffee and you get to the end of that transaction, and then you want to order another coffee, before you order the other coffee, you could see what your current balance is, so that you could know whether you need to put more money to buy another coffee, or you would need to, or you have enough to just buy one. Then I wrap this in a lower, just for, once again, simplicity purposes, because sometimes you don't know if the input would be uppercase, lowercase, whatever. So just put in all lower, just simplifies it all. And yeah, so now we have an if if statements here to check to see what the input was for the choice. So you can see if the choice is equal to report also. So the report is not listed here because it is a function that would be reserved for the people that would be I guess maintaining the machine. So if someone comes to maintain the machine, they would want a report of, okay, how much of each ingredients is in the machine, and also how much money is in the machine. So we have a report function, and obviously you don't want any and everyone to know that information. So obviously that's why this isn't listed here, but the people that would be maintaining the machine and operating the machine would know this beforehand, so they could access this report choice here. And then as you can see, it will just basically print the machine water, the water content, the milk content, and the coffee content, and the amount of money in the machine. And then obviously you have the balance, like I said before, it just shows you how much money you have. And then the following choices is for each one of the coffees. So this is one of the issues with the old coffee machine and the sequential code. As you can see, this section of code in the if statement is very long. It's very long. It's repeated, which is not optimal. So that is also one of the reasons why I employ the OOP and the updated coffee machine. So yeah, so here you could see basically you have something called coin check, which and then a while loop. So usually I would employ checks for my loops to see once the particular criteria is fulfilled, it exits the while loop. So you would see at the end of every I guess try statement and stuff, you would see that the checks would be set to false. So once it's set to false, that means that the everything ran as expected, and it would just exit this section of code and move on to the next code in the sequence. So here you can see there's a try statement. So the purpose of this try statement and this except statement for value error, sorry, is just to ensure that once again the user inputs the right data that the machine is expecting. So in this case, you can see that it does, if it encounters an error, if the user inputs something that's unexpected or unwanted, then it prints this, which is this is an invalid input. Please input an integer amount of coins. So realistically, you can't put a quarter of a coin or half of a coin. So you have to put integer values of coins into the machine. So for that reason, the code only accepts integer numbers. So here you have it's an integer number of coins, and once it gets to this except, then it does not get to this input check, it becomes false. So now it would just recycle the code in terms of requesting this information here, which is the numbers of quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, which once again needs to be an int. So as you can see, this is it takes the text and the text input and converts it to the string input, sorry, and converts it to an int here. So with this input, so yeah, so you can see it stores the input in each one of these variables, and then this part of the code here basically calculates it calculates the amount of money the customer puts into the machine. So you can see it uses this variable here, which is labeled quarters, and then although it might look quite similar, this is actually quarter and not quarters, and this quarter variable is this variable you can see up here, which is quarter, which is a value of 0.25. So you just put in the integer amount. So if they put in 2 quarters, 2 by 0.25 would be equal to 0.5, and then you just do for each one of them. And I mean if you don't want to put a particular coin, then you put 0. So yeah, and then it just sums the value of the money you put into the machine, and then it actually adds the money to the machine. So as you can see here, it takes the same thing and adds it to the machine. I think yeah, it adds it to the machine. So yeah, so then this is basic, and once this piece of code is executed, then and it does not throw an error, then it jumps to this input check becomes false, and once it's false, it doesn't meet this condition for the while loop, so it exits the while loop and then it moves on to the next section of the code. So this is basically repeated for each one of the types of coffee. So you can see it's more or less identical. The only difference would be the criteria for meeting the criteria for the amount of ingredients needed for the coffee. So basically, this part of the code is saying that, okay, well, if the machine water is less than 50, which is the amount required to make the coffee, then it's gonna return just a response to tell the customer, okay, well, there's insufficient water in the machine, and to make whatever coffee you choose. So, and it's basically the same thing with the coffee. So yeah, so this is basically repeated, as you can see, for the latte and also the cappuccino, right? And once again here you get so this here is actually a check for the inputs of the initial choice, which is the coffee, and once it clears this, then it exits the loop once again. Yeah, it exits the loop. So now we come on to this section of the code, and this section of the code basically processes everything that is happening within the machine, rather than what's happening with the customer and the customer money and such. So as you can see here, once again we have a while loop and a customer money check trigger for that while loop. And yeah, so basically it's saying if the customer money is more than the coffee cost, so just checking to see that it meets all the criteria required to make the coffee. Because if basically if the customer doesn't put enough money, then it will not execute this bit of code, or if it doesn't meet any one of these criteria, and it's all and, so it all has to meet these criteria all at the same time. And once the customer money is sufficient, there's enough water in the machine to make the coffee that's required for the coffee, there's enough milk and there's enough coffee, then we could then create the coffee. So, and just calculate the actual deduction of the coffee cost from the customer's money. I mean, if they put in exact money, the change, which I call the change, very simple, it's gonna be 0. If the customer input more money, then they're gonna receive the amount of change, which is the difference between the coffee cost and the customer money that they input. And obviously, if it's less money, it just doesn't reach this part of the code because it doesn't fulfill this bit of code here. And yeah, so it did, and also, well, now it's making the coffee, so it deducts the water from the machine to make the coffee, the milk, and the amount of coffee to make the coffee, and then basically presents the coffee to the customer and tell them, here's your coffee, whatever the choice is, enjoy, and it comes out of the loop. Here it's basically this, so this code is if the customer money is not enough for the coffee. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, if it is that the customer ends up putting in less money, or they bought a coffee before, they put money in the machine, they bought a coffee, and after buying that coffee they have some change remaining, but the change is not enough to buy another coffee. That's kind of where this bit of code will kick in here, where it checks the amount of money that the customer have, and it's less than the cost of the coffee. So then it tells the customer, okay, you have insufficient money, you need to insert more money if you want to continue, and then it presents the customer with the opportunity to input that money. So once again, calling very similar to before, quarters, dime, nickels, and pennies, calculating the customer money and, adding it to the total money that's in the machine from the customer. If it is that none of the ingredients, it checks each of the ingredients and at least one of them are not enough to make the, at least if they're all, sorry, let me rephrase that. If the money is equal and there's enough of each of the ingredients, you make the coffee. So I actually think, once again, so going back to what I mentioned before, this bit of code may be a bit repetitive here, and I think just the repetitiveness of the code, some of that is really resolved with the new coffee machine. And then you have the restart check here for the whole loop for the code. So yeah, beyond that, we just have once again a while loop here. So if it is that this restart check remains true, then it asks the customer if he would like another coffee, yes or no. And once again, it lowers it for simplicity, and if restart is equal to no, then the coffee machine on sets the false, so the coffee machine essentially comes off. It exits that the while loop at the start of the coffee machine, and the restart check is now also false, so it will not restart, and the coffee machine comes off, and it also presents the customer with their change. So this bit here is basically saying, okay, well, now that the customer wants nothing else, it's all over, the customer is satisfied, they have everything that they want, they're gonna now give the customer back their change that's in the machine. So if there is any extra change, if it's exact, then they don't get any change. If whatever the difference is, if there's enough money in the machine, they get their change. So you present the customer the change and you tell them to have a wonderful day. And if the answer to the question, would you like another coffee, is yes, then basically this is set to false so that I could go back to the top of the code, and the customer money now becomes the change. Alright, so the customer money now becomes the change because the customer has some money existing from the previous transaction, and that now becomes the customer money again for the restart of the code where you first initialize that value. Customer money is 0. So yeah, and you also tell them the current balance, which is that change that I was initially talking about. And here you just have some checks to make sure that the right inputs is input and not anything that's unexpected or unwanted. So if it's not yes or no, that's why we have this else here, then it does not come out of it does not restart check remains true, and the loop restarts asking the customer for the right input. And yeah, and you have them telling, okay, that's not the input that we're expecting, can you provide a better input? So yeah, essentially that is an explanation of the old coffee machine. And as you can see, there's some repetitiveness. It's a bit lengthier than required. It's a bit cumbersome. So and that is why I made the decision to apply OOP to make it a bit more efficient, a bit more sensible, a bit neater. So this video is quite long as it is. So what I would do is I will now end this video, and I will do a second video explaining the OOP for the new coffee machine, and basically what I did to change, all the repetitive code is something that's just neater, more modular, and well, supposedly easier to understand. So if you look at the new coffee machine code, not taking into consideration the actual class, but the code itself here currently, it's substantially smaller than the sequential code in the old coffee machine. So I will do a follow-up video just explaining the OOP, explaining this coffee machine class here, and the actual code that utilizes that class. So yeah, thanks for watching, and comment below if you don't understand anything or you want any clarification with any of the things I explained or I talked about, and we'll try my best to clarify those things in the next video. Thanks for watching.